Hello and welcome to the second part of the series on Gayatri Spivak's essay Can the Subaltern Speak? In this segment, I would like to strictly focus on the term of subalternity which is central to this essay. We know that the essay Can the Subaltern Speak is a critique of the conversation between the French post-structuralist theorists Michel Foucault and Gilles Deleuze. Spivak denounces the radical claim of Foucault and Deleuze that the disenfranchised are capable of speaking for themselves and that they don't need to be represented. Now, the important question is whether, as the French theorists say, whether they need to be represented or whether they are capable of speaking for themselves. So, before we can decide on that, it is important to know who the subalterns are. The term subaltern was first used and coined by the Italian Marxist activist Antonio Gramsci in his article Notes on Italian History to refer to the non-elite or subordinated social groups who are subjects to the hegemony of the dominant class. They are the underprivileged on whom the dominant power asserts its hegemonic control and impact. That is, they exist within a dominant hegemonic order, but they do not have any political space in it and they cannot have any views. And if at all they have any opinion, also nobody is going to listen to them. Now let me tell you the story about how this term, which originally meant a commissioned officer below the rank of a captain, came to signify the subordinated social groups. So as we know, the term was first conceived by Antonio Gramsci when he was in the prison. And because his writings were subject to censorship, he used the term subaltern as a code word for the subordinated, for any class of people who were subject to the hegemony or domination of the more powerful class. That included peasants, workers, and all other groups who were denied access to hegemonic power. The term subaltern is correlated with third world countries and derives its spirit or essence from Marxism and post-structuralism. In fact, the term was first adopted by a group of scholars of post-colonial studies who formed a subdiscipline within the field called subaltern studies. Their intention was to initiate a productive and organized discussion of subaltern themes. The Subaltern Studies Group was founded by the Southeast Asian historian Ranajit Guha, and over the time it also included other scholars like Homi Bhabha, Gayatri Spivak, Partha Chatterjee, Deepesh Chakrabarti. Gramsci was interested in subaltern historiography. According to him, the history of the subalterns is also as complex as that of the ruling class. So, in keeping with Gramsci's principles, the main objective of subaltern studies was to examine how the subaltern classes were formed in different kinds of settings in Southeast Asia, particularly India and its neighbors. So they wanted to provide some kind of a counter history to address the discrepancies or the one-sidedness of the official histories that focused only on the affairs of the state and the ruling class. The term subaltern includes a range of different social locations. In the social context of India's rigid caste and class system, the location of the subaltern is further complicated by the layered histories of European colonialism and Indian nationalism. The theoretical resource for Spivak's ongoing discussions on subalternity comes from the discussions of peasant insurgency and resistance movements in India by the subaltern studies scholars like historians, including Shaheen Amin, David Arnold, Partha Chatterjee, David Hardiman, Ranajit Guha, and Gyanendra Pandey. The subaltern studies as a field of a study in post-colonial theory came into prominence in the year 1988 with the publication of a series of journal articles published by Oxford University Press in India under the title Selected Subaltern Studies. This was edited by Ranajit Guha and Spivak with the foreword by Edward Said. And now, this was followed by the beginning of a unique school of researchers whose supporters came to be known as the subalternists. This subaltern studies was started as part of the effort of a group of Western educated scholars to reclaim the history of the subalterns. Remember that Gramsci believed that the subalterns also had a history as complex as that of the dominant classes. So, the idea of the subalternist was to make a trip to the past in order to unearth the hushed up voices, the voices that were hushed up due to different reasons. And they wanted to reclaim the history of the subalterns as separate from the Eurocentric bias of imperial history, that is, history of the elites. So, as a different from the elitist centered Cambridge school that upheld the colonial legacy, these scholars, they focused on subalterns in terms of caste, class, gender, age, language, race, official position, and status. They also wanted to emphasize that political dominance is not the same as hegemony. The three names associated with subaltern studies are Ranajit Guha, Gayatri Spivak, and Deepesh Chakrabarti. The main theorist who spearheaded the subaltern studies group is the Southeast Asian historian Ranajit Guha, who is also the editor of the anthologies published by the subaltern studies group. He had already done a lot of work on peasant uprisings in India. But the problem is we only have the history of the rural peasantry and also the urban working class as recorded by elite social groups. The whole issue needs to be problematized because the historical representation of the lower class subaltern group is done keeping in view only the interests of the ruling power or the dominant classes. There is no reliable social historical material. So the subaltern studies historians, they try to recover the political will, the voice and agency of the subaltern classes by making an attempt to critique by making a critique of the colonial and elite historical representation. They argued that the subalterns are not part of the hegemonic order, their voices are not heard, and their consent not taken. And the subaltern studies group, they decided to retrieve the voices and also record the history of the subalterns. Deepesh Chakrabarti's work, Habitations of Modernity, Essays in the Wake of Subaltern Studies, published in 2002, discusses how subaltern studies could be a post-colonial project of writing history. The intention of the subaltern studies group was to give voice to the colonized or render them audible. According to them, their history is designed to be a contribution made by the people on their own, that is, independently of the elite. And they try to achieve this objective of restoring the history back to the subordinated by establishing a journal called Subaltern Studies, published from Oxford, Delhi, and Australia. So the common people would get back their agency. So they argued that even after independence, Indian historiography is actually bourgeois historiography. Gayatri Spivak assumes that there is a clear and distinct political agenda. If a subaltern's voice cannot be retrieved, it can be reinscribed through a critique of the dominant historical representation. She was very much critical about the current histories of India, which is being told from the perspective of the colonizers. In the essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, Gayatri Spivak critiques the production and also the retrieval of subaltern speech, mainly because of its dependence on the dominant practices that define the expression of the subalterns. It also critiques the construction of a position from which the subalterns can speak and also this position from which they can be heard. The crux of the essay Can the Subaltern Speak? Is a question of whether the subalterns are capable of speaking for themselves or whether they are reduced to a position from where they are represented, heard or known in an ideologically falsifying fashion. In the conversation between Foucault and Deleuze, there is this mention of an information group for prisons, the GIP, which was organized by Foucault to create conditions that enable prisoners to speak for themselves. So what Gayatri Spivak says is that instead of creating such positions that will enable the subalterns to speak for themselves, the intellectuals should strive to speak to the historically silenced subjects of the non-elite. Speaking to them is more important than listening or even speaking on behalf of these muted subjects. Spivak does not attempt to problematize the authority of colonial discourse. Rather, she was more interested in the ways in which imperialism has constructed narratives of history, gender, and class of the hegemonized subjects according to a single axis of differentiation, which is the centrality of Western history and man. She therefore concludes that the subaltern's actions are interpreted and also determined in terms of the dominant codes of colonial imperialism and nationalistic elitism. Gayatri Spivak, in exploring the question of whether the subaltern can speak, questions both Gramsci's and Guha's treatment of subalternity. As per Guha's group, the subaltern refers to the underrepresented group, their hidden histories, and even to the historiographers who study them. But Spivak critiques all of these. She complains that there is an element of essentialism in the attempted recuperation of a subaltern consciousness. The reason is that all these attempts at reclaiming the voices of the subalterns are limited to an exploration of the colonial texts which minimize the subaltern activity. They look for subaltern voices in the colonial texts, and they try to rewrite the history of colonial India from the viewpoint of peasants. Even Guha's projects attempted to rewrite the development of the consciousness of the Indian nation and its history instead of touching the consciousness of its people. But the problem is that the documentary evidence that they rely on, which is again a collection of colonial texts, is absolutely one-sided. There are no subaltern memoirs, no diaries, no histories. Gayatri Spivak does not want to make an effort at writing another history of the subalterns like Ranajit Guha did. Rather, she wants to search and unearth the representation of the implications and mechanisms of the representation of subalterns in colonial texts, the way a subaltern is represented in colonial or elitist historiography. She does not believe that the subaltern consciousness or voice can be retrieved, and therefore the post-colonial theorist should actually be aiming at showing this impossibility of retrieving voices. It is possible to locate the positions from which the subaltern speaks, but they can never be heard or read. Finally, to conclude this discussion on the term subaltern, I would like to bring in Robert Young, an interpreter of Gayatri Spivak's text. According to Young, it's pointless speaking for a lost consciousness that cannot be retrieved. There is no subaltern voice that can be reclaimed or recovered, and therefore the post-colonial intellectual should actually be focusing at discovering the places of subaltern's absence from history. And he cites as an instance of the subaltern the place of a woman's disappearance in an aporia. Aporia is a blind spot where understanding and knowledge is blocked. One should actually be trying to find out these blind spots in history as obviously inscribed from the colonial perspective, and also identify the places in colonial historiography where knowledge or facts pertaining to the subalterns are blocked or deliberately suppressed. So that closes our discussion on the term subaltern. By now you have the answer to the big question, can the subaltern speak? But never mind, we still have a lot of things to discuss from the text, which we will be doing in the subsequent segments. I believe you were able to make some sense of what I was trying to explain today. Thank you for listening.